In the dusty archives of the Museum of London, there sits a medal that technically shouldn't exist. It's a knight's cross, beautifully crafted, green enamel, gold trim. It was awarded to the bravest soldiers, the smartest diplomats, and the wealthiest bankers of the 19th century. To get this medal, you had to be a high-ranking citizen of the Principality of Poyais. You had to belong to a Central American superpower with a capital city, St. Joseph, that boasted wide boulevards, a domed cathedral, and an opera house where the orchestra played Mozart under the tropical stars. Thousands of people fought to get this medal. They traded their life savings for it. They sold their ancestral homes in Scotland to buy a ticket to the land where this medal came from. But here's the problem. If you put on your best suit, packed your trunk, and sailed to the exact coordinates of that opera house today, do you know what you'd find? You wouldn't find a city. You wouldn't find a single brick. You'd find a swamp, a deadly malaria-infested jungle, where the only citizens are howler monkeys. Poyais didn't fall. It didn't get conquered. It never existed. It was a hallucination, a phantom nation conjured from thin air by one man, a man who floated a 200,000-pound bond on the London Stock Exchange. That's billions today, backed by absolutely nothing but his own charisma and a printer. This isn't just a story about a scam. This is the story of the king of scams, a fraud so massive it helped trigger the Panic of 1825, the first modern financial crash in history. Meet Gregor MacGregor, the Prince of Nowhere. You might know Fire Festival, you might know Theranos, but MacGregor makes those guys look like amateurs. He didn't just fake a product, he faked a sovereign state. He invented a flag, a currency, a constitution, and a history. And the craziest part? He didn't do it in the shadows. He did it while dining with the Lord Mayor of London. He did it while being toasted as a war hero. And when he was finally caught, well, let's just say justice in the 1800s was a little different. In the next 20 minutes, we're going to break down the playbook. We're going to look at the dopamine ladder MacGregor built to hijack the brains of an entire nation. We're going to read the diaries of the people who sailed to their doom. And we're going to watch as a ship full of hopeful families sails straight into the heart of darkness. Buckle up. We're going to the country that never was. To understand the lie, you have to understand the liar. Gregor MacGregor was born in Scotland in 1876. From day one, he had main character syndrome. He joined the British Army at 16, buying his commission. He loved the uniform, he loved the status, he hated the work. After a trivial disagreement with a superior officer, code for he was impossible to work with, he was essentially forced to retire. He was 23, unemployed, and desperate for fame. So he pivoted. He sailed to Venezuela in 1812 to fight in the wars of independence against Spain. It was the perfect place for a man who cared more about medals than morals. He managed to marry Josefa Antonia Andrea Aristeguieta y Lovera. That's a mouthful, but here's the important part. She was the cousin of Simón Bolívar. The Simón Bolívar. Suddenly, MacGregor isn't just a failed soldier, he's revolutionary royalty. He became a general, but his military record was, let's call it, mixed. At the Battle of Ocumare, while his troops were being slaughtered on the beach, MacGregor literally jumped into a boat and rowed out to a waiting ship, leaving them to die. At Portobello, he captured the city, failed to set guards, and when the Spanish counterattacked, he famously jumped out of a window and swam to safety. Bolívar was furious. He ordered MacGregor to be hanged for treason if he ever returned. Effectively banned from Venezuela, MacGregor landed on the Mosquito Coast of Honduras in 1920. He met the local king, George Frederick Augustus. They drank a lot of rum. MacGregor gave the king some whiskey and jewelry. In exchange, the king signed a piece of paper granting MacGregor the right to farm a plot of land. Just a land grant, like, sure, you can grow some corn here. But MacGregor takes this paper, looks at the local title Cazique, which means chief, and translates it for London as sovereign prince. He returns to London in 1921 as His Serene Highness, and he launches the product. Step 1. The brochure. He publishes a 355-page book called Sketch of the Mosquito Shore. The author? Captain Thomas Strangeways. Spoiler, Captain Strangeways didn't exist. He wrote it himself. And this book, it is the Harry Potter of financial fraud. It claimed the rivers were filled with globules of pure gold. It said you could harvest corn 3 times a year. He didn't just lie about the gold. He lied about the infrastructure. He described the capital, St. Joseph. He said it had a royal palace, parliament buildings, and, crucially, an opera house. He commissioned engravings of these buildings and sold them in the streets of Edinburgh. He even claimed the natives, the Poyais, loved the British so much they would basically do all the manual labor for you. It was a colonial fantasy tailored perfectly for a tired, post-war Britain. Step 2. The financial instrument. In 1822, British government bonds paid 3%. Boring. MacGregor's Poyais bond paid 6%. It was the crypto of 1822. The City of London, the most sophisticated financial center on earth, ate it up. They underwrote a £200,000 loan. That's tens of millions today. MacGregor wasn't just rich, he was the toast of the town. He opened a Poyaisian legation office, flew his Green Cross flag, and hired a staff to process the applications. But a prince needs subjects. MacGregor targeted his own people, the Scots. He played on the national trauma of the Darien scheme, Scotland's failed attempt to colonize Panama a century earlier. He told them, "This is our redemption." He sold land for 4 shillings an acre. That was a week's wage. It was affordable. He sold the dream to everyone. Young aristocrats seeking army commissions, bakers, cobblers. He even sold the title of official shoemaker to the princess, to a man named Helly. In late 1922, 2 ships were chartered, the Honduras Packet and the Kennersley Castle. They loaded up with 250 settlers, and the cargo manifest. This is the detail that breaks my heart. MacGregor approved the cargo. It included heavy wool blankets for the tropics and crates of ice skates. Yes, ice skates for Central America, because MacGregor had told investors there were mountains high enough for winter sports. That is the level of delusion we're dealing with. We're about to see what happens when fantasy collides with a hurricane, and trust me, it's darker than you think. But first, if you're enjoying this dive into history's crazy hustles, do me a solid and hit that subscribe button. We're trying to build a channel that's actually real, unlike Poyais. It really helps us out. Okay, back to the nightmare. November 1822. The Honduras Packet arrives at the Black River. The settlers put on their Sunday best. They crowd the deck, spyglasses out, looking for the spires of the cathedral. They fire a cannon to salute the governor of St. Joseph. They wait for the return salute. Silence. Just trees. Endless, impenetrable jungle. No opera house, no port, just a couple of rotting bamboo huts left over from a failed logging camp. At first, they thought they were lost, but then King George Frederick Augustus showed up. The settlers ran to him, waving their land deeds, signed by MacGregor. "We are the citizens of Poyais. Take us to the prince." And the king? He looked at them and basically said, "Who?" He told them MacGregor was a fraud. He had never sold him the country. these deeds were worthless. Legally, these families weren't pioneers, they were squatters. Then came the hurricane. A storm swept in and blew their ship out to sea, taking most of their supplies with it. They were stranded on a mud bank with nothing. They built makeshift shelters from palm fronds, and then the rains came. You know how the guidebook said the climate was remarkably healthy? Reality check. It was a malaria swamp. The camp turned into a mud pit. Malaria, yellow fever, dysentery. James Hasty, a sawyer, wrote in his diary, "Sickness and despondency was so general that few were able to make any exertion. They lay in hammocks, watching their children die." Remember Heli, the royal shoemaker? He realized there was no princess, no palace. He had dragged his family to hell for a lie. He couldn't take it. He lay in his hammock, delirious with fever, took a pistol, and shot himself. He was the first suicide. He wasn't the last. Word finally reached the British colony of Belize. They sent a schooner, the Mexican Eagle. When the British superintendent saw the survivors, he was horrified. He reported they looked like skeletons risen from the grave. Of roughly 250 people who sailed to Poyais, over 180 died. That's a 70% casualty rate, worse than most battles. They lost their money, their families, and their dignity. And while they were being buried in unmarked graves, where was the prince? He was in Paris. When the news hit London in late 1923, the press exploded. The Times called it a monstrous fraud. MacGregor should have been lynched, but he went on the offensive. He blamed the settlers. He said they were lazy and ungrateful. And then he did it again. In 1825, he set up La République de Poyais in Paris. He raised another £300,000. He was preparing to send a fresh ship of French victims to the death swamp. But the French government was sharper. They noticed a spike in passport applications for a country that wasn't on the map. They raided his office. He stood trial in 1826. The evidence was overwhelming, and yet he was acquitted. His lawyer argued that MacGregor wasn't a con man, just a dreamer who had been misled by his own agents. The court bought it. They convicted his secretary, but let the prince walk free. The man was Teflon. He spent the next decade trying to revive the scheme, but the magic was fading. In 1838, his wife died. He was broke. So he played his final card. He wrote to the Venezuelan government, the same one that had ordered his execution. He said, "I am a hero of the revolution. I want to come home." And Venezuela said yes. They reinstated his rank of general, they gave him a pension, they forgot the fraud and the dead Scots. They only remembered the legend. Gregor MacGregor died in his bed in Caracas in 1945. He was buried with full military honors in the cathedral, attended by the president. The man who killed 180 people and stole billions died a hero. It feels unjust. It is unjust, but it tells us something terrifying about human nature. Why did it work? Because MacGregor didn't just sell land, he sold identity. He sold the shoemaker the dream of being royal. He sold the banker the dream of being a pioneer. We are all desperate to be part of the next big thing. We all want to believe there's a secret map to paradise that only we were smart enough to find. Look around. Fire Festival, Theranos, crypto coins named after dogs promising to go to the moon. They are all Poyais. MacGregor knew that if you promise people a golden age, they won't look too closely at the map. He was the prince of nowhere, but he ruled over the very real kingdom of human greed. Thanks for watching. And hey, if anyone offers you a private island for the price of a used car, maybe check Google Earth first. If you want more stories about history's greatest liars, click here. And unlike the Bank of Poyais, our subscribe button actually works. See you next time.